Well, welcome everyone to our final session in our pornography series. And I am so thrilled to introduce my new friend, Melody Stone. She is a trained trauma specialist, and for over 30 years, I believe, it just a long time. So she is so experienced and such a great expertise. And she does a lot of wonderful work also with anti-sex trafficking cause. And so I want to have Melody in a moment to share a little bit more about herself so you get to know her. But we're really so blessed and honored to have you, Melody, to share, to just kind of wrap up this whole important topic on pornography and culture, and how culture affects, our mindsets, our perspectives, and how we can be culture changers, just where we are. And we want to go away from here, just knowing that we can make a difference in the sphere of influence that we have, starting with our families, right? And be the change. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us. Explicit Movement is here to serve all of you parents and leaders, and to talk about these kind of conversations that are sometimes awkward to talk about. And we want to just make it natural so that your homes and churches are the safest place to talk about anything under the sun. And so we want to just give you just equipping and just great empowerment and knowledge that can really help you and help the young people in your life. So without further wait, Melody, welcome, and share a little bit about yourself, and we can just dive into the subject.
Okay, thank you so much, Michelle. So yeah, just to give you guys a little background, I was a trauma trained therapist in Mason City, Iowa, and had originally moved there in 1995 and was working in residential treatment. For a while, I was the director of a day treatment program, and then I worked in the residential program as a clinical therapist. And I loved my job, but my dream was always to have a private practice. So I eventually opened my own private practice and worked doing that for quite some time. And during that period, I was getting a lot of training for trauma-informed care and, working with people with PTSD and things like that. And I ended up having 4 girls on my caseload that had been trafficked out of a porn ring out of Kansas City. And so, and they didn't come all at the same time, but just over a period of several months. And so I was working with these kids, and then one night after work, I tuned into a broadcast on TV, and it was about human trafficking. And I knew quite a bit about it, but I thought, oh, I'll just watch this program. And afterwards, I just felt God's presence in the room so strongly. And I felt that he was speaking to me. And he said, in my spirit, he said, you're going to be heavily involved in human trafficking work. And my response to him was, I will go anywhere in the world you want me to go. I was just felt like I wanted to be radically obedient, and I was ready just to listen and go where he wanted me to. So long story short, I did end up on the Big Island in Kona. And I never would have thought in a million years that I would have ended up in the middle of the Pacific, but I love it here. And originally I'm from the Pacific Northwest, so I am used to being around the Pacific Ocean and love that. So anyway, I worked a lot with human trafficking here with survivors and with at-risk youth. In 2015, I started the Hawaii Island Coalition Against Human Trafficking. We have monthly meetings, and we connect with other islands as well. And then in 2018, I started Hawaii Island SafeNet, and that is a volunteer network of Christians that want to help our at-risk youth and survivors of trafficking. And we provide all kinds of services, from medical to mentoring, tutoring, transportation, just legal aid, lots of different things. And so I'm building a network of trained Christians that are able to do lots of different things on our island. And So, and then I've been, working some directly with survivors as well, and then doing just lots of training around the island with trauma-informed care and prevention education and things along that line. And even just our training tonight, we're talking about pornography. And so kind of jumping right into it, several years ago, I took some training with an organization called Seattle Against Slavery. And the topics that they discussed, that they met 5 sessions, I believe it was, with youth in high schools. They started out just very entry level, just kind of getting to know each other, kind of talk stories, start to feel safe with each other, and to begin to be vulnerable. And then they build each week, step by step, and talk more in depth about some of the issues that are going on in the world that kids are dealing with every day. And at one point they did separate the girls from the boys, so the girls could open up more and talk and be more vulnerable, and then the guys were talking in their groups as well. So it was really good training that I took, and I loved it. And that's kind of where I started to think more about what some of these things that our kids are dealing with, how for instance, girls are lots of times they're objectified, and women, females, are objectified, not in just in our culture, but in probably almost every culture in the world. And so really starting to critically think about that, and for the boys to think about that too, and what their responsibility is, what their piece of that is, and how this generation coming up can shift the cultures, and make some changes within the culture, because it takes time for that to happen. We all have some faulty beliefs and misperceptions and some prejudices, whether we want to admit it or not, and some biases. And it's good to come face to face with those things and really confront those things within ourselves, and say, this isn't right. I'm making an assumption about this, or this person, that sort of thing. So with Seattle Against Slavery, we did a number of activities with the students and interactive kinds of things, and it was really good. And then they were talking about and addressing things like abuse and exploitation, gender discrimination, how people are objectified, and also how media and technology influence and drives and influences our society. So that's one thing I kind of wanted to talk about tonight. If we had, now this is just for adults tonight, but sometimes I would do this type of training and I would invite parents and adults to come on, and it would be changed up a little bit. But if we had kids on tonight, I would just actually take some time right now and say, let's talk about what has changed in the last, couple of generations, and let the kids have a little dialogue and, volunteer information. And then the parents could say, well, when I was your age, this is the way it was. And so we could kind of compare and contrast some of the life experiences that we had. What was accepted and what then versus now, and things like that. And so we want to look critically at the messages that come through the media, the TV, films, magazines, ads, social platforms, and that influence our decisions and shape our values. And what I'm seeing, I'm sure you folks have seen things either on the TV, or maybe you went to a movie, or like looked at a magazine and just opened a magazine and you saw something in there that was really inappropriate, and actually it could be even considered what I would call soft porn sometimes, some of the things that we're actually just being exposed to on a daily basis. And so it sort of desensitizes people in our culture, and our youth, to just think, it's no big deal. So I want to go into a little bit and Michelle has the PDF for this, so she can send this on to you, and then you can peruse through it. This is something I wrote um, a year or so ago, and I got permission from Focus on the Family magazine, by the way. There are some quotations in here, and I did get permission from them. So anything that's in quotes would have come from their magazine, but I just want to look at some terms. And when I'm working with girls and even with boys, a lot of times they don't really exactly know what a definition of something is. And so we talk about what is sexual harassment, for instance. And then, you know, it says when another person harasses you repeatedly with sexual comments, content, or actions. For example, it can be verbal comments about your body, requests for sexual favors, sexual jokes, or flashing, or just those kinds of things, or electronic sharing. Also would be involved with that, sexting and things like that. So that's kind of a definition of sexual harassment. And then we've also talked about sexual assault. A lot of kids know what that is. It's when someone touches you in a sexual way without your agreement or consent, and where you feel pressured, where there's coercion involved, and pressure, sometimes aggressive attacks or threats, blackmail, drugs or alcohol, and things like that. One of the things we spoke about at the Seattle Against Slavery training with the kids was about date rape. And we took a survey, and a lot of the kids said that when they were out with friends, that they were in situations where they did not feel comfortable. They didn't really want to have sex, but they were being pressured into it. And I just want to share a little story right here. This might be a good juncture to do that. I was working a couple years ago with a young lady she actually attended a Christian school, and she had decided that she wanted to remain pure until she was married. She'd made that decision, but there was a young man at her school that just kept pressuring her, and he just said, you know, I just want to be with you, you know, and I want to have sex. And, you know, he just indicated, you know, just kind of day in and day out, sort of banging away at her, you know, and she just would say to him, no, I don't look at you that way. I don't believe in that. I don't want to do that, you know. And so when I was counseling her, she ended up crossing the line and going ahead and having sex with him. And she was pretty broken about that. And she said, Melody, I don't know why I did that. She said, I think it was because he just wore me down. Like day in and day out, you know, he'd make comments to me at school, or, you know, different times. And she said, I just felt so pressured. And finally, it's just like, I just thought, oh, I'll just do it, just get him off my back, you know. And because I think that it was so stressful for her. Now, we talked later about some things that she could have done instead of just, you know, continually engaging him. And so in our counseling, we did that, and I counseled her about that she could reclaim her commitment to purity, and that God's forgiveness and restoration was there. And that was really important for her to know that. So, you know, it helped her to stabilize and kind of reset. And she came away from that counseling with some tools that helped her to navigate these kinds of situations in a healthier way, or a better way. So I just wanted to share a little bit about that. And I did send, is it okay, Michelle, if I just mention that video? They can, the one that I sent you. Okay, we have used this in Seattle Against Slavery with the students in high school. Now, I understand I'm a conservative Christian. I have taught my kids very strong biblical beliefs and values, you know, biblical worldview. So I really highly respect that. And But in this particular video, we were taking it into public schools, and you as a parent could go on YouTube. Michelle has the link. She can send it to you, and it's the clean version. Make sure you watch the clean version. The other version has a few bad words in it, and it's, you know, a little bit crude, but the clean version is pretty good. And it's about a 3 or 4 minute video, and it's called, the name of it is Consent and Tea. Like if you would consent to do something. And all of my, I have 8 children. I have 6 adopted daughters and 2 biological sons. And all of my kids have watched this video when they got to a certain point in their lives. Well, maybe not my oldest ones, because that was years ago, they were graduating, but my most recent ones. And we would use that video to talk about consent in terms of sex. And obviously we talked about that, you know, we have the value of waiting until marriage, but also even in marriage relationships, there should be that level of respect, so people are not pressured or manipulated. And so I think that it was a good video to watch. And you guys can decide whether you would want to share it with your kids or not. That's entirely up to you. But go to the clean version. It's only like a 3-minute video, and I just went on YouTube. It's called Consent and Tea, and she's got the link, or I do too. Then the other one, some of the other terms that kids need to know is, of course, sexual abuse, and that can be physical or mental, emotional abuse. So, you know, kids usually know about that as well. And then coercion is when someone threatens, tricks, manipulates, or force you to do something that you don't want to do. And then we've talked about consent already. Then, you know, I just kind of drew this out in this handout that you guys will have access to. So I kind of paint this picture for kids, and I'll say, you know, the beautiful thing is if you wait until marriage to have sex, then it's 2 people that are coming together in love and mutually consenting to consummate their you know, their marriage. And it's a beautiful thing that God has designed. So we've talked about that too. And we talk a lot about the advantages of waiting, you know, and the benefits of waiting, why it's a good thing, you know, because kids tend to think of it in different ways. They think, oh, well, why would I want to do that, you know, kind of thing. So then yeah, I'm still doing these terms. So so it's important for kids to know that if they have been objectified or they've been in these situations, that it's not their fault, and that their voice matters, and it's important for them to speak up and you know, set boundaries in a situation, and that they matter, and that their needs and feelings are just as important as anyone else's, and so they don't succumb to that kind of pressure. And so I just wanted to share too, I shared this already with Michelle, but my daughter is a senior in high school now, my little caboose coming through, and she's my last one that I'm raising. But she, a couple of years ago, she goes to a really good Christian school. It's an awesome school. But not all kids that attend Christian schools are committed Christians. And so, you know, there was a young man that came up to her. She always dressed very appropriately. And he came up to her and he asked her, do you wear Victoria's Secret? He snapped the back of her bra, you know, and just grabbed, you know, her shirt in the back and snapped it. And then he said, do you wear Victoria's Secret bras? And, you know, she was kind of in a state of shock that he asked her that. And they were all having lunch together, and she just said, his name wasn't Sam, I'll just say Sam. She just said, Sam, that's none of your business, and that's really inappropriate for you to make that kind of comment. And he goes, well, geez, you know, you don't have to get so touchy about it, or something to that effect. And she just simply got up and she took her lunch and she just moved to a different table. And there were a couple of kids sitting around with this young man, and they were kind of, he was trying to laugh it off. You know, she could kind of tell that he was a little bit embarrassed at that point. You know, he wanted to embarrass her, but she was just not going to sit there and, you know, continue a dialogue with him. So he was kind of snickering, and the other boys were kind of, you know, looking down and looking a little embarrassed and saying, knock it off, you know, kind of thing, and kind of laughing, you know, a little bit too. But it was just an awkward situation. But then one of these other young men came to Jade later, and he said, he was in, it was just a private discussion that they were on their way to class or something. He said, Jade, I'm sorry that that happened to you. And he said, are you doing okay? And then she said, yeah, I'm fine. You know, I'm fine, you know. And so he said that wasn't right for him to do that. And I just want to make sure you were okay. So that's something that we want to teach our young men, because I believe that God hardwired young men to be providers and protectors, and men in general. But I love that this other young man came up and he was being a protector to look at her emotional state at that time, if she was doing okay. He wasn't coddling her. He just came up and said, you know, are you doing okay? And then she said, yeah, I'm fine. And then it was, you know, they went their separate ways, kind of, you know. So I love that whole interaction. That was a really good example to me of how a young girl can handle a situation by walking away from it and not continuing to engage in conversation, but also a young man to come alongside and be supportive. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Melody. I think it's such a beautiful, powerful story because obviously you really prepared or equipped your daughter in directly or indirectly. She was able to voice herself and stand up with assertiveness. And she knew words to say that, you know, stop it. That's inappropriate. That's none of your business. That she had that confidence and that assertiveness to stand up to it and walk away. And I think that's really powerful of your daughter to do that, and a great example for us parents to really talk to our daughters about how to respond when things like that happen. So they have a game plan, so to speak, you know.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
thank you for sharing that.
And sometimes I've just been driving down the road and, you know, maybe you'll see something, or, you know, I don't know, you'll hear something on the radio or see something, or maybe something will just pop into my mind, and I'll ask my kids, you know, when I've been raising them, what would you do in this situation if you ran across a situation like this? Sometimes just kind of throwing out little scenarios. What would you do? What would be some ways we could respond to that that would be helpful? And sometimes when a kid is in the car, you know, they're a captive audience. And so, you know, you can have a little 2 3 minute conversation with them, and they're not distracted, you know, doing something else. And so sometimes it's line upon line and precept upon precept. It's teaching day by day, little by little by little. You know, we never do anything all in one fell swoop. You know, it's always just the little bite size pieces of information and knowledge and wisdom that we're giving our kids. And so think about those kinds of situations, even when I've worked with young children, to help very young children learn how to identify and express their needs and feelings. With young children, we just take maybe 5 or 6 basic feelings words, and we teach those young children, what does it mean to be you know, embarrassed, or, you know, that might not be one of the first ones we teach them. It would be happy, sad, mad, scared, you know, things along that line. And then, you know, maybe you're watching a movie about Lassie, and Lassie got injured, and, you know, Timmy was really upset, and so then you ask your young child, how do you think that Timmy felt. What do you think he felt like when that happened? And then the child will say, oh, he felt really sad and he was scared that the doggy was maybe going to die or something. So it's helping kids to be able to empathize and to be able to connect appropriate words with the feelings. And we do the same thing with teenagers too, like with these terms. If they don't know the terms to use, they're going to be kind of stuck. And if they don't know how to express their needs and feelings appropriately. So anyway, it's just really good to help our girls and our boys to have healthy boundaries. And what I loved about the Seattle Against Slavery training is they would talk about calling things out and calling things in. So you're walking down the hall, and so maybe at school, and a girl drops all of her books and papers, and they're kind of just blowing around or whatever, and so somebody, maybe a young man, comes over and says, oh, let me help you pick these up, and that's just, we call those kinds of things in. And somebody else walking by might say, in our school, we show respect and regard for each other. I mean, they're thinking that. And so they want to give that young man just some strokes for that and say, that's really awesome that you helped her pick up her books. Thanks for doing that, And, it's just reinforcement that you did the right thing. You did a thing that was honoring and was seeing a need and, filling that need. And sometimes it's other kinds of things too, like calling things out and in, like in that situation with my daughter. One of those young men at the picnic table could have said to Sam, that's not his real name, but could have said to Sam, you know what, that's not cool that you did that, and you need to knock it off. That's not okay. We don't treat girls in our school this way, and no female needs to be treated this way. That was inappropriate. None of the boys had the guts at that moment to do that. But I was glad that later on one of them came up and made a repair. It's good to be able to make repairs in life. We've all done that before. We don't do things perfectly. So hopefully there was some learning that went on in that situation. So, and then in this handout that Michelle can send you, it has some scripture verses about our value and worth that are really, really powerful. And one of the things, I use this material when I'm teaching self-defense classes. I team up with someone that does self-defense. And then when the kids are taking a break for their water and their snack break, I talk about situational awareness. And I also talk about just their value and worth, and not allowing people to take advantage of them and pressure them or manipulate them into doing things that they don't really want to do and they don't feel comfortable with. So there's a lot of scriptures in there. And so she can send that over to you. I'm not going to go through all those right now. It's about a 3-page handout that I use when I'm doing training. But I also wanted to move on to make sure I got, so then going back to the changes that we've seen in society, kind of jumping back to that a little bit. A lot of times people don't think about pornography and how there's seamless links to a lot of other things, not just with sex trafficking and pornography, but there's links between sex addiction, substance abuse, childhood sexual abuse, incest, domestic violence, sexual assault, fractured families and relationships, violent crimes, mental health issues, suicide, and murder. And we know that in countries where they legalize prostitution, that their violent crimes against women increase substantially. That's research-based. And also the suicide rate increases because the average life of a person that is being prostituted is about 7 years when they're being prostituted continually. So either they're going to die at the hand of someone else, possibly a drug overdose, malnutrition, or even just get to the point where they're so hopeless and so beaten down that they finally just end their own life. So it's really very sad in these situations. But so pornography, there's just seamless links between all of those things, and probably, you know, other things too that I didn't mention. And you probably maybe have already discussed this, but about 90% of people that are sexually exploited or sexually groomed for human trafficking, sex trafficking, when they entered were entrapped in this situation, they were between most of them were between the ages of 10 and 16, and some were much younger. So if people say to you, well, you know, prostitution, that's pretty much just an adult problem. If you interviewed a number of people that are adults that were groomed into it, they would say, oh yeah, I got groomed into it when I was 12 or when I was, 13. Those are very common ages. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that and let you know about that. I didn't know if that had been shared with you before. And so one of the things in speaking about pornography, and this is really sad too, is that when these young kids are, victimized, they're broken into sex trafficking through the porn industry. So they are videotaped, they're filmed, they're in all kinds of situations where they're actually producing porn for pornographers, and about uh, it's a gateway. It's a gateway into sex trafficking, and 89% of all porn is produced in the US. And most of the victims that are being exploited in the porn industry are US born citizens. They are not from foreign countries. A lot of people would think, well, do they come from Asia? Do they come from Thailand or other places? India, and the majority of them are from the US. That's why there is a link between missing children and sex trafficking. And, people can deny that all day long and say, oh, there's not that connection. Well, there is. I'm not saying that every missing child ends up being trafficked, but within 48 hours of a child coming up missing, or a runaway or missing child, 1/3 of those kids will be targeted by a trafficker. So we do know that's a national statistic. So we know that Pornhub had 33.5 billion site visits from people online, seeking online porn, and that was back in 2018. And Pornhub, you probably know what that is. It's a site where you can go for all different kinds of pornography, young children. I mean, they even have infants. It's just sickening. It's really sickening. And it's appalling, the evil that we see in our world. And then since 2019, since we've had our COVID outbreak, online grooming has increased by 1,200%. Think about that. Online grooming. It's because our kids were not in school. They were home, not maybe as well supervised. They were doing a lot of online learning. And we know that common ages that kids are exposed to pornography are 7 and 8 years old. And so those would be typical ages where they're first exposed. And then, the traffickers, they're not going to lose money. They just shift and change how they're grooming people, how they're going after people. So that statistic of a 1,200% increase came from Shared Hope International, and I'm a and ambassador with Shared Hope International. So I was shocked when I read that. I thought, whoa, did I read that right? 1,200% increase. So that means that it's so vitally important that we have safety devices on our you know, tablets and phones and, you know, all of our devices in our home. And you guys have talked about all that, so I'm not here to, you know, really focus on that tonight, but it is really vitally important. So we know that in the neuroscience of the brain, basically Pornhub is hijacking our neural wiring with dire consequences, you know, in our brain. And there's a handout that I have about this as well. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into that because that's something you can just read. There's a few paragraphs on it. But one of the things I wanted to focus on tonight is using something called cognitive dissonance to shift thinking and behavior. Now, I was on the last broadcast that you had when your pastor came on. He did an awesome job. It was wonderful information, and he spoke a lot about building relationships, and that's really, really important. And I would completely support that as well. But what cognitive dissonance is the state of having inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes, especially as relating to behavioral decisions and attitude change. So one way that I kind of conceptualize this or think about it, this is we might think of cognitive dissonance as being like a three-legged table. You know, you could probably kind of prop up a three-legged table against the wall and it would sort of stand up, and maybe you could set a few things on it, but you're not going to really put too much on that table because it's wobbly and unstable. And that's what, when people justify things that they're doing and minimize and just avoid and deny and things like that, that's that cognitive dissonance coming into play, where they have to somehow stabilize it in their own minds, even though it really isn't. So, so one example that I was thinking of is, well, the optimum outcome of this would be for the person to begin to challenge their own faulty beliefs and develop an internal locus of control and think about, what kind of person do I want to be? What do I respect in other people, and how do I want to be myself? Is this the kind of person that, you know, is this how I want to live my life? And do I respect others if they're doing these things, or do I criticize them and then I do the same thing, you know? What if you're, I'm just going to throw this out, what if your son or daughter came to you and said, well, Mom, or Dad, I like using porn and I don't see what your big problem is. Everybody does it now. Everybody does it. Yeah, just because your generation didn't, it's different now. And we even do it at school. And, you know, it's what happens. And it's just entertainment. It's like you watching a suspense movie or you know, some fast action movie. It's like that. It's just entertainment for us. And what people do is their choice, and it's fine as long as it's not hurting anyone. So you might get those kinds of statements from your son or daughter, and what that would elicit in most parents, including, I think, all parents, your first reaction might be to, you know, sort of the mother bear to come out, or the father bear. and to, you know, want to like lecture or maybe engage in an argument or try to use logic and reasoning and building a moral case, you know, things along that line. And we've all been down those trails before, haven't we? And it just, it doesn't go over well in those kinds of scenarios. So one thing I'd like to cover tonight is maybe just saying to a young person that might say that, just, you know, maybe you're doing the dishes or you're doing something and you go, you're acknowledging that change is really hard. You know, you're not even confronting head on what they just said. You're just saying, you know, change is really hard for everyone. And people must really want to change if there's something that's bothering them or that is not working well in their life. And it's hard, just simply acknowledging it and just letting it sit there. And then maybe not even discussing anything at that point that day. Maybe a day or two goes by, and then you might say, you might be in the car, you have your captive audience looking for that window of time, that we've all had those little windows. It's like the time is right now. And so you might say something like, the other day we were talking about pornography and you were telling me about how things are so different now. And your daughter or son says, yeah, it's really different. And so you might say to them, I'm wondering if you would just you'd be willing to answer a few questions that I have, so I can just kind of get clarity about um, and have a better understanding about your perspective on this issue. That's not attacking them. It's not saying you're wrong, this is really sick, whatever. You're just trying to get their perspective, not agreeing with them. And then I wrote down some suggested questions, the way we might phrase things. Now, this isn't, like a cookie cutter thing. I don't want to imply that. But one of the things you might say to them is, just, kind of get the conversation going a little bit. And don't ask a barrage of questions, maybe just 2 or 3 questions, and say, is there anything about your porn use, as you've admitted to using porn, that is interfering with your life and your relationships? Honestly, do you feel like there's any part of it that is interfering with the way your life used to be? Because I've noticed that, you don't spend as much time with your friends, and and you might not even make that observation, but you could just ask them the question. And they might completely lie about that. They might say, nope, nope, everything's good, and then you just kind of let it ride, but they're going to think about it anyway, your question, and it's going into their conscience. And you can be praying that God will use that question to go deeper into their conscience and their subconscious and work, have the Holy Spirit work on them. And then I put some other questions too. Some of these might be on a scale between 1 and 10, like how much time do you think you would normally think about porn every day? Like, is it intruding in your life quite a bit, interfering in your life? Like on a scale between 1 and 10, how much would it interfere with your life? And as a clinical therapist, when I have worked with people that came to me and said, for instance, they might say, I'm really struggling with depression. And so sometimes I'll use kind of a scale to sort of get a sense of how much they're struggling. So on a scale between 1 and 10, how often do you feel depressed? And they'll say, well, it's about an 8 or 9, and so that gives me a good a kind of a gauge to know what their perceptions are. Um, and then I might ask how they felt after they watched porn. How do you feel afterwards? Because pornography, we all know, and this is in this article too that I wrote, is that it's like everything else, like for instance, pot is considered a gateway drug. And so a lot of people will start out, just, smoking pot, and they think, oh, it's no big deal, but it's oftentimes a gateway to other drugs like cocaine and meth and things like that. So it's the same way with pornography. If they start out with what would seem like kind of a normal sort of pornographic material, they want the endorphins in their brain and the dopamine levels and the other chemicals are not activated as much after a while, so they have to look for something that's more extreme. And so it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper what they're doing, and things that they might have said, I would never ever do that, like they might say early on, like if a person says, well, I would never sell my own child into human trafficking, but if they're already molesting their child, it's just a small step, a tiny step, when they do that for so long, to finally decide, well, I lost my job, or I could use some extra money, and my daughter's, old enough, she could help us, financially. They could justify it. So it's that sort of thing. And then asking them, since you've started watching porn, have your beliefs and attitudes changed about females in particular? And talk with them about that a little bit, because there's research behind this. In Amsterdam and other countries where they legalized prostitution, they found that their whole society was looking at women differently, and the violent crimes towards women, against women, increased. And I read articles that women who were prostitutes or being prostituted wrote, and they said they would walk down the street, they were spit on, they were jeered at, all kinds of things like that. And women in society were just looked down on in general. So it does change people's perceptions. And then just asking them, do you look at the world differently now than before you started watching porn? And then my $10,000 question is, it's not really, but it's just one of the questions. But sometimes I'll say to people, if you could snap your fingers and just go back to your life before you started accessing porn, and you knew that you could just snap your fingers and go back, would you choose to do that, and why? And a lot of times people will say, well, heck yes, I would do that. Now, we all know that breaking a porn habit takes work and effort, and sometimes, quite often, professional help and resources people need to come alongside of them and help them. But sometimes, you set the bar really low and say, if you could go back and just snap your fingers and be, younger before you were accessing this, would you do that? And a lot of people will say that they would stop. They would want to change. So anyway, so outside of the porn industry, we know that we live in a sex and porn driven society. And just when you look at magazines, I was at the library, or went to the library, checked out a couple of magazines the other day, but they really didn't have the kind of ads that I wanted in those particular magazines. But you can look everything from cars to food to cameras to vacation packages, cosmetics, alcohol, everything, can be portrayed with sex appeal. And so we just get inundated with it, and the fashion industry too, of course. And it's a marketing, these products are multi-billion-dollar industry, so they're going to try to get you to buy things that you might not ever buy, because how are you going to feel if you wear this cologne, or you wear this brand of makeup, or whatever it might be, and how is it going to affect your life and make you more appealing, those kinds of things. So good things to think about is, does this ad, and I get kids to talk about this when we do the trainings, does this ad objectify, promote, or diminish the value of another person or group? Looking at the ad, what is the subliminal messages? What are the, you can just look at the ad on face, just for the face value of it, or you can look deeper and see what other messages are coming through this ad. And there's usually lots of other messages that are coming through if you really look at it. And who are those people that are being objectified? And how powerful is that message to change perceptions and attitudes and beliefs about these people or groups? So those are just good things for you to talk about with your kids, and and get their input on. So one of the things, we're going to wrap up here in the next few minutes, but one of the things that we do at the end of the Seattle Against Slavery training is that each one of the students in their 5th session, they come in and they have something that they have done as a project. And it might have been to volunteer at an organization in Seattle that works with survivors. Maybe they worked in the kitchen, helping to prepare a meal, or cleaning a pantry, or painting, or doing things like that. Or maybe they made their own films. They wrote poetry, they wrote stories, just a variety of different things, did a theater vignettes. And one of the things that I would love to do is get a group of students together. I have a passion for this stuff, and Michelle does too. But before COVID, you know, everybody talks about BC, before COVID. So before COVID, I had a group of students from a charter school that had signed up and said they wanted to do some little vignettes about all of these issues we're talking about: date rape and sex trafficking and abuse, domestic violence. And they wanted to do these little vignettes and go around our island to different theaters and community centers. And over the summer, we would have like a little drama troupe that would go around week by week and be in a different community and do this free presentation in the communities. And, you know, adults would be invited to come, and community members, and it would just be a great time for young people to get the message out, to shift the culture. And if you're sitting in a theater watching a vignette, it really impacts you when you see something happening on a stage that makes you think differently about something that before you might have had kind of a blasé attitude about, like, oh, it just happens in society, it's not a big deal, you know, that kind of thing. So anyway, some of the last thing that I wanted to, you know, kind of share, and then we'll have a little Q&A time here, is, you know, just about, you know, some common things that setting boundaries in your home. And right now, most of you on here know about what's happening on our southern border. It's just very sad what's happening with people on both sides, you know, the people that are coming here to try to find freedom, and then you know, we're not able to accommodate them, so where our border is not secure, and it's not a win-win for anybody right now. And I don't care what kind of the political fence side of the fence you're on, but there's just a lot of things that are happening that are not good. And so in the same way, we have to set boundaries and you know, have some of these borders and boundaries set up in our own homes. And I know you all know that. So one thing that I do as a parent is, when my daughter is using you know, a device, she does that in a common area. And so, you know, like out in the open where, you know, other people could be interacting and things like that. And then establishing time limits on our devices. And then when those devices are turned off, don't just go somewhere and get bored, you know, doing nothing, because they seek those things because of the stimulation and the interaction, you know. And so you might say, well, okay, when you guys are, you know, your time is up, we're going to go to the beach this afternoon, or we're going to go out and get some ice cream, or we're going to do this or that, you know, or we're going to play some games or something, you know, so that maybe a family activity or one-on-one activity that you can do together, rather than just sit around and do nothing, because then the kids will say, I'm bored, can I get back on my computer again, or, you know, laptop. And then we want to always demonstrate unconditional love and acceptance, and really be looking for the gold in our kids. Hijack them to greatness, that's what I call it. And I'll just give you a really short little example of that. One of my daughters that I raised, she had ADHD, very attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and I was homeschooling her. And it was a Monday morning, and we had a doctor's appointment that day. And I said to her, Skylar, you know, I know it's Monday morning, but I really need to count on you to get your math problems done. And then, you know, I can help you with those to correct them, but we've really got to get some things done before we go to the doctor. Well, she was twiddling around with her pen or her pencil and just kind of messing around. And I was sitting there drinking my coffee and starting to get a little stressed, you know, and I thought, I'm not going to nag at her. I'm just going to wait. And I waited until she had her notebook, you know, if you can imagine this being her notebook that she does her math in. And all she did was just like flip it open just like that. You know, it wasn't really intentional. It was just she flipped open her notebook and her math book. That was what it was, her math book. And I looked at her and I thought, I'm going to hijack her to greatness right now. So what I did was I said, Skylar, and she looked at me like, oh, I'm in trouble now because I'm messing around. And I said, wow, I am so impressed with you right now. And I said, look at you. You are a self-directed 7th grade learner. And I said, you just opened your math book. I said, that would be hard for any adult to do at 7:45 in the morning on Monday. That would be hard for an adult to do, much less a 7th grader. And I said, I am so impressed with you. Look at you. You're being a good boss for yourself right now. And boy, did she ever. She sat up, she just been kind of leaning back in her chair and messing around, you know, twiddling with stuff, you know. And so she opened her book, and then she picked up her pencil very intentionally. Then it wasn't just this kind of messing around. She picked it up, she got her paper, and she got right to work. And I just had to laugh to myself because I thought, that was kind of, you know, it's kind of like your plane is on the way to Cuba. It's not going to be a good scene, you know. And you know, but you turned that plane around, and she was heading back in a good direction. So she got her math done. And so we always want to look for the gold in our kids. And when you see the tiniest little thing that they do right, you might see a lot of dirt. You know, we all can see a lot of dirt in people, can't we? And you go into a gold mine, you don't see, like, it's not like the 7 dwarfs going in and seeing all this sparkly, shiny gold everywhere. There's a whole lot of dirt in there to get to the gold. And so we just want to look for the gold and hijack them to greatness. So that was one example. I wish I would have had that on video. It would have been great. But it wouldn't have been the same if it was, you know, being recorded. But so we just want to really just encourage and support our kids and look for the gold. And then just have respect privacy in their bedrooms and the bathrooms. I'm sure you guys have talked about that before. And you know, just engaging in open and honest conversations, and just really being very willing to have those, and to say we can talk about anything. And I want you to know that there's no topic that you'll bring up that I'm gonna, you know, shut you down on. You know, now sometimes some things you might have to set boundaries with and say, you know, when you get a little bit older, I'll have that discussion with you, but right now I think that you got enough on your plate. I'll discuss it to a point with you, but you know, that's something that will come a little later in life. You know, just enjoy this time in your life while you can still be a kid, you know, that type of thing. So, all right, so yeah.
It's so great tonight. You really jam-packed so much gold in this hour, really, literally. And gosh, I just love the way that you gave uh, all of us parents language and ideas on how to have those conversations, those connection, you know, springboard type of questions to engage. That's so wonderful. And thank you so much for your time. This is so great, everyone.
You're welcome.
I will, Melody gave me a bunch of PDFs and the link to that video she mentioned earlier. I will email all of that out to you guys early next week. And also Richie Cruz from last week sent his PDF. So you're gonna get a little treasure chest in your email next week, everyone. But thank you so much, Melody, again. It's been such a joy having you and such a wealth of resource in just inside of you. So can you close us in prayer, a brief prayer,
A-
Melody?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for uh, joining tonight. I would love to get to know each one of you and just have a talk story sometime. So if we ever want to just do that, I'd love to do that and just maybe have just a conversations about things that are coming up and just have a little freedom to do that if anybody's interested. So, all right, I'll close this in prayer. Lord, we just thank you so much, Lord, for how you guide us and help navigate us through uncharted waters, Lord, and through difficult seasons um, and times in our lives, Lord, where we don't have you know, a guidebook, Father, except in your word. And that's an awesome guidebook, Father. But Lord, we just thank you so much for how you give each one of us wisdom and discernment of how we can best connect and relate to our kids and help them to grow up to be healthy, well-adjusted young men and women, Father, so they can go move forward and impact our culture and society, Lord. And most of all, Lord, so that they can just share your love with other people, Lord, and share the gospel and make a difference in this world, Lord. So we pray, Father, that you would help each one of us to do, to listen to you, your guidance and your wisdom, Father. And as we walk with you, you will make our path straight and plain and clear for us, and you'll light our paths. And we thank you for that, Lord. I thank you for each person that's come on tonight on this Zoom meeting, Lord. I pray that you would bless each family, Lord, and that they would just feel your love and your presence with them day by day, Lord. And I pray for their young their kids and their family, Father, that you would bless them as well and just help the parents to raise them up to be young men and women that serve you, Lord. And I thank you for Michelle in this ministry that she is developing, and I pray you would bless her and bless this ministry. And I pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Melody. Have a
Yes.
wonderful weekend, everyone. And I'm sure we're going to see Melody again in the future. She's a new Ohana family member.
Yeah, it's been great to meet you.
Yeah,
All
thank
right. God bless you guys. Have a great weekend.
you. You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.